So I'm very interested in first like your corporate origin story, at least at PepsiCo. You know, you started as a sales trainee there, and I hear so many beautiful stories of people who started as an intern, started in as somebody just mentoring me, and then I ended up in one of the top seats. And I wonder how that happens. How do you start as an entry level person and end up president in this way?
Look, I was incredibly blessed to have a great career at PepsiCo. First of all, getting recruited off campus, Hampton University, or on campus at Hampton University, and then being able to start in Baltimore, Maryland, and essentially really get a great understanding of the business. So I appreciate starting at the very lowest level so you can really get a feel for how things work and operate. And then at the same time, I was allowed to sort of be myself and charter my own course in terms of my progression and my development, things like that. And so I just kind of took off. I mean, the business is very fast paced, it's very intense, very dynamic. The company was the same way, and so it was just this environment of pace and pace. And so there were those that made it, and if you certainly made it and survived, you accelerated. And there were those that didn't make it and obviously chose to go work in other businesses, other industries, et cetera. So it had a early on an up or out feel. It did, to be honest with you. I think we had some labeling of that inside the company. I'm not sure that's always the case or was the case throughout my entire career. Matter of fact, I know it was the case throughout my entire career. But early on, you can get a feel that there was a lot of encouragement to, want to get promoted, want to move up, want to accelerate. And so that created really high performance expectations that, quite frankly, just stuck with me throughout my entire career. So the bar never, ever lowered. The bar, if anything, kept moving up higher and higher and higher as I took on each assignment. I was able to challenge myself. I was actually be able to be my hardest critic at the same time. So therefore, there wasn't a challenge that I wasn't able to sort of mentally, emotionally take on and try to do my best to be my best and deliver, solid outcomes.
I imagine, and I've not sat in a corporate role as high level as yours was, but I imagine this is not like rocket science, but it's what does it take then? Like if it's not, brain surgery or getting, a spaceship off to the moon, what is it that separates people from who find success at the highest levels to those that don't?
Well, I talk about the three R's a lot: results, relationships, and reputation. I think singularly those pillars in my mind, as I've gone through all my corporate experiences, I would use those three pillars as the keys to the success. And there's a lot of double clicking that you can do on those things. But I think those are the pillars, right? If you're really, really good at all three, you're going to achieve the highest level of success. If any one of those are off, it may slow you down and stall you. If you're only good at one of the three, you're not going to have a very short career, certainly in our company, and maybe others as well, I would imagine. But I think there's this notion of I look at having conviction for what business you're in. Like the business is a tough business. You absolutely have to want to be there. You have to want to be there. You have to embrace the challenges of the business. You have to embrace the pressure of getting performance. You have to embrace the resiliency and determine all the things that come with that industry and that hyper competitive environment. You have to bring that. Two, you have to bring a sense of ownership. You have to own what happens. You can't shift blame or deflect on others, things that may not happen, things that may not play out, or things you have misses. You have to own those just as much. You own the wins. You have to own the misses too, and the lessons that you ever learn and bounce back from. So I learned this sort of fail fast mentality because you're going to have failures along the way. You're not going to bat 1,000 in everything that you do. But I think failing fast was certainly an important lesson for many of us who were going up through the system. So I look at conviction. I look at ownership. I look at action orientation. You have to have a bias for action. You cannot sit back and wait for something to happen. You have to go create. You have to go create sort of that magic, that energy, that competitiveness out in your area, your space, your function, whatever business you're involved with. It requires a heavy degree of action orientation, finding solutions. So as challenges come up, you can't sit back again and just sort of explain, I've got all these challenges going on. While you do that, you got to go find solutions and create really an atmosphere of action. I look at also being very consistent in what you do. You don't want to sort of, in my mind, bob and weave or be, herky jerky in your philosophy and your attitude and your mindset. You show up one day, you're coming in on top of the world. The next day, you're down. Your energy
Yeah.
levels are low. So you want to be a very consistent performer. I think when you show up for work every day, not only for yourself but also for the people around you. This might be people that you're leading, it might be people that you're working for, it might be peers, and you got to show up for the customers because they want to see the energy and commitment from you as well. And also, I look at hustle, man. You got to move fast. It's a fast-paced world. It's a fast-paced business you're in. And I look at the people that have a lot of conviction for what they do. I look at a lot of people that own their career, they own the decisions, they own the whole thing through and through. People that have a bias for action, people who are very consistent, people that hustle. I think that is a really good success formula for people to achieve the highest level possible. And then you start transitioning to this: deliver results, build world-class relationships, and then develop a great, strong reputation, which really is your brand. Putting those three together, I think, creates a lot of longevity and sustainability in your efforts to be the highest level you want to achieve, or just be the best version of yourself, whether you're moving to the top or not.
There's this quote I found from you where you said, "I still draw on the things I learned my very first week on the job." Like, talk to me about some of those things that were foundational to your experience.
Yeah, again, I to go back to that sort of conviction model and conviction, ownership, action, consistency, and hustle. I was going out on the route, and I find that, I really have to own. I have to own making sure all the products were priced properly. I have to own to make sure all the product was put in the right flow. I have to make sure all the equipment is stocked properly. I have to make sure the back rooms are clean. I have to make sure I'm throwing out my trash. And there were things along the way in the first couple of weeks that I was missing on. I didn't necessarily price everything right. I didn't throw all my trash away, and I found that all these comments and criticism, things were coming from all over. They were coming from store managers, they would come from backroom personnel, they were coming from customers, they were coming from grocery supervisors. So all of a sudden, like, it felt like the world sometimes was collapsing on you when you weren't doing parts of your job. So I recognized then is that attention to detail matters, and then all those other attributes I talked about as well. And so that was that was almost a microcosm of what my whole career was going to be like. You're going to have people, stakeholders who are involved at that time. These are people around the store. But as you grow and as you exponentially grow in the company, it's now a big customer. It's now a bigger geography. It's now thousands of people, tens of thousands of people that you're responsible for, right? So the stakes just get higher and higher. But that early snapshot around, attention to detail, understanding all your stakeholders who are involved in your journey with you have to be focused on. You have to deliver for them as well. It's not about just what you do and your time and your experience. You also have to make sure the experienced people around you that support you also they're enjoying that, and it's complementary to what you bring to the table. So I learned early that it's going to take, while you have to bring a lot of the effort and energy to ignite a lot of what happens around you. It's more than about you. It's about a team environment, whether inside the company or outside the company, and your ability to see that and build that camaraderie and build those relationships early, understand the value of those and how they contribute to you having the highest level of success. I thought was great for me to get at an early stage, because then I was able to replicate that. Again, stakes get higher, constituents get higher, there are bigger titles around involved in scenarios now. But I didn't really look at that as because of a bigger stage. That didn't make me more nervous or create more anxiety. It just drew me back to, hey, this is no different than when you were in the store. You have people that are important to the success puzzle here. You've got to make sure you're bringing all those people along for the ride, but you have to be the catalyst for what happens in this environment. This is your house. These people are here living with you, supporting you, making this house grow. But you've got to be the catalyst for change, for growth, for vision, and bringing these and leading these people to success with you.
You've managed multiple billion-dollar operations there at PepsiCo, and I wonder what is different about how a company that big thinks about growth and scale that small business owners, startups can learn from.
Well, I think it all starts with your strategic plan and where you're headed. And so the company was always, looking forward. So while we were, into the details, into the moments, into the day, the week, the periods, as we call them, the quarters, there was still obviously a line of sight to the future and the roadmaps being built out in these different phases. And these are 3 years out, 5 years out, 7 years out, 10 years out. So very strategic roadmap of where you want to be down the road. And then how do you sort of start building the bridges of where you are today into where you want to get to? What investments required from a brand building standpoint to drive consumer demand? What investments are required to drive operational excellence? That's obviously through your supply chain and your sales organization. What investments are required to help build, call it the best place to work, having the strongest talent, the best athletes, I would call, recruiting, developing, accelerating people's careers. And then also you have a community aspect. How do you ensure that you have operate with purpose? And so if that agenda is sound across those pillars and that framework on a strategic roadmap, all the way dialed into what's in the immediate and operating planning cycles, it's going to be a business that, will be built to be successful. And you're going to have to pivot and tweak it. Everything doesn't go perfectly, so you have contingencies and things like that you think about. So a company that basically stays ahead, always looking at newer trends, trying to understand and react to where the consumer is going, not just where the consumer is today, I think is also important for smaller businesses to take on. So you got to have one eye on what's going on now, and you got to have one eye on what's going to happen later, and be prepared for that and invest in that so you're able to harvest the growth that comes out. If not, you can get left behind and you're playing catch up and you become a distant number 3, 4, 5, 6 player or whatever in the space. And now your growth cycle, your growth outlook has really shrunk because you've missed out and didn't do the proper due diligence on planning.
Yeah, you make me think of this experience I had when I worked in corporate America just for a very short time. I wasn't suited for it, I was working in the corporate America for this short time, and I was recruited by this company as an executive fellow. So I was following the CEO around for a period of time, and I was going to those board meetings and et cetera. So I would get a chance to meet the board and the directors and et cetera. And sometimes they would invite me out, get to know me. And when I went to my role, I was still developing those relationships with the board when I was a fellow. And I remember the person who I got sent to work under was like, hey, you got to chill on the board, relationships. And I remember thinking, because I had also heard this same person talk about another individual who was remarkable, but nobody knew who they were. And I'm like, well, if you're not building the relationships, then what you're talking about with that guy over there, that would happen to me. And so I wonder what your take is on how to, my two love language words are ambition and initiative. And so I wonder how you can find that balance between doing good work in your role, but still developing the relationships to advocate for yourself.
Oh yeah, I think it's critical. I think again, that fits very nicely into my results, relationship, reputation framework, right? So once you establish a performance, sort of mantra that you can get the numbers, because performance matters, and doing it the right way, doing it consistently, all that matters. That's like, to me, the first entry into the next conversation, the next room. And then all of a sudden now really it is about the sort of construct of how well you collaborate. What's your trust level like with people as you go out and engage? Are you a win-win person or are you a win-lose person, right? There's a way to navigate relationships. Are you just good at managing up? Are you good at just managing down? Or can you manage across, right? And so really treating relationships as the real foundation of this house was super important to me and others who I think saw the highest level of success, because you do have to know people have to know you, and you've really got to establish the real strong fundamentals, again, on trust, collaboration, teamwork, effort, win-win. Those type of things have to be in play for you to navigate yourself. And then I call reputation is your brand. People have to know who you are. They have to see you from a character perspective. They have to see you from an image perspective. How do you show up? How do you communicate? How do you look? Those things all matter, quite frankly. And you get judged on those things all the time. And so you take a day off and somebody's seeing you for the very first time on an off day, that could set you back many, could set you back many cycles on that. So I really tried to preach to everybody, every day you've got a body of work to do to execute your job. You need to deliver in that. You need to wake up every day and think about how do you continue to, build, establish, build, strengthen, reinforce trust, collaboration, communication amongst the broader peer set that you have, again, above you, below you, beside you. That's inside the company, it's outside the company. You're always nurturing relationships when you can. And then your brand, are you showing up as your best version of yourself? That's whether, again, the way you look when you show up, the way you communicate to people, that's the way you put out material, the way you write emails, your slides. You're always, portraying a brand. You're always portraying an image and a reputation that you want to have on the high end of the range. So it's complementary to everything else that you do. And then that lift, quite frankly, just puts you in spaces that are going to create massive separation between you and many others in the organization, right? So you have to do both. It's not the and, it's not the or, it's the and that you're talking about. So you have to do both. You can't sort of say, I'm going to play it safe and just keep my head down and do everything right and hope I get noticed. That's the way to play it. Or just play this game where I'm just going to spend time with a lot of people and have all this high exposure, but have nothing to talk about or nothing tangible with that, no substance with it. That's not going to get you very far either. It may feel better because you know people and you get to hang around people and get to go to some cool places, but at the end of the day, you're going to get exposed that you're not delivering anything. Yeah. So you're going to lose on that end as well. So to me, you have to put both together And I think the framework I talk about is very useful for me and others. And there's certainly other ways to approach it as well. But it is definitely about the and, not the or.
What inspires you to take on this Big Dave's cheesesteaks as a franchise owner?
You know what? I can't find Philadelphia cheesesteaks here in Orlando, so I decided to buy a brand myself. Look, I grew up loving cheesesteaks when I was a kid and living in D.C. It was always a treat. I didn't to eat them often because it was definitely a more expensive treat in the family when we went out to eat. But when we had them, they were really really good. When I started putting money in my pocket, cutting grass and doing chores and things like that, I would weekly go get cheesesteaks on the weekend, and so it became a really important brand of food category for me as a child. And therefore, that never left me. And so when I graduated from college, I go up to Philly to see my friends. We go to Atlantic City. We go, hang out, go to an Eagles game or something the next day. And I always had to stop through and pick up cheesesteaks on South Street or other places in town. So it's been a brand of food that has stuck with me for many, many years. I moved around a lot. And I missed that category a lot when I moved out west. I basically didn't have a cheesesteak for like 10 years maybe. Unless I came back to town for some reason. But I can't even think of when I had one in the 10 years. And so I've always had this craving. I got to meet, obviously, Derek Hayes when doing my Pepsi relationship and supported his business when he really started to get his bounce. Took him under my wing, took him out to HBCUs, took him on HBCU tours, did a lot of investment in his brand to help give him a lift. Certainly that was to help navigate through coming through COVID, after COVID. Obviously now he has been very, very successful. And he and I always spoke about one day, when I wasn't in the business anymore and he decided to franchise, consider me for a store. That was one store.
Yeah.
He made me sign for more than one store to get it, but I'm excited about it. It's a unique brand of food, a very tasty, mouth-watering brand of food that you just can't get in any sort of scale in this market. I know consumers love regional food brands. So it's an opportunity to create some fun, some excitement. And for those who are in the Northeast, there's a ton of Northeasterners that live down here, as you know. It'll be an opportunity for them to engage in something they may have experienced, back when they were home, or something they crave on a routine basis. At the end of the day, we want to be here for that. I can eat a cheesesteak now if I want to, 365 days of the year. That's what's most important to me. So we're going to have some fun launching this business. I get to add some jobs, create some new excitement for people in town. So it's the whole business proposition. Spend time investing back in the community. And so I look at this as an end-to-end proposition while we're going to have fun doing the work.
Many executives struggle or just hesitate to get into entrepreneurship. Like, how have you navigated that, and how have I imagine it's a change of mindset, how you think about attacking, business cases. What advice would you give those people who are considering it?
I mean, look, I would say your corporate experiences prepare you for this. I have a very strong brand building acumen. I have a very strong operational acumen. I have very strong talent management acumen. I have strong community relationship acumen. I have strong partnerships acumen. So everything that I learned in my 35 years is very transferable. Actually, I think it's set me up in many ways to be even more successful being an entrepreneur. I got to work with a lot of entrepreneurs, so I got to learn from a lot of people who were in their own businesses while I was in the corporate space, right? So in my mind, a lot of those skills are transferable. I think with anything, you have to take some risk with this. This is, certainly it does have associated risk with it, but I look at it as more of an opportunity area, kind of like I did throughout my entire career. I don't look at what could go wrong. I look at what all could go right. So I think a lot of it is just mindset. But I think from a skill package, I think most corporate executives are built to do this and do it, especially if they pick their passions and places they really, really care about and lean into. I think, they're going to find themselves to be set up for success. So I would encourage more people to take a look at it. Hopefully, people can learn from what I'm doing, take a page out of my book. Now, there are definitely some learning curve things that I'm going through in terms of, things like construction and real estate and, equipment. There's some early learnings that I'm going to have. So as I go through the next phase of expansion, I'm going to be much more well equipped at setting myself up to be more efficient in that model. But yeah, there's some early learning curve things that I'm going to do better at next time. There are things I'm hitting the ground with immediately that are all a benefit and attributed to my corporate career. So, there's give and take there. And I look at, obviously, every day that goes by, I learn the experience to get better and better. But I can't wait to get open. I'm getting open here in about 6 weeks
Yeah,
inside my brick and
congrats.
mortar stores. I'm already open inside the arenas. The arenas have done very, very well. I'm really proud of what we've been able to do inside both the Kia Center and Camping World Stadium, just a short period of time. But now it's time for brick and mortar and to obviously create more access to the community on a 365-day basis. So I'm looking forward to that, opportunity to do that in a couple of weeks. And we're
Yeah.
opening 2 stores. That's just the way it landed. I didn't necessarily plan it to be that way, but based on the real estate selection and where these locations are, I'm really pumped up about where they are and the communities they're going to be in. And I'm excited to get both of them off the ground as soon as possible.
Yeah, typically when you buy into a franchise, you're buying an operation, and then you get to, work out that playbook, right? And it sounds like you got in early enough, and potentially you're helping design the playbook. And I wonder, what was the thinking behind that? First of all, you can correct me if that's not true, but I wonder, what is the thinking behind doing that versus, you going to start Derek's, cheesesteaks, or Derek's,
Right.
whatever.
Well, look, I'm proven, it's proven that I know how to scale big brands. I've been doing that my whole life, right? So you give me a good brand, I know how to scale it. And that's kind of how I looked at this. So I wanted to make sure, certainly the things that I did in my career were transferable to what I do in my next chapter. And so, yeah, starting my own brand, I saw the challenges of starting new brands inside the big company. I saw how much money was required. There's certainly a higher failure rate than most probably can imagine, and that's not a slight on any R&D or anybody for that matter. It's just hard. Like the business is hard to push new products through, and it takes a lot of resources to hit really home runs or hit what I would even call doubles and triples in the business. So I wanted to make sure that when I did this, one, I was doing something that had a lot of growth in front of it. And again, this category is not as developed in this market, so it's a lot of, I call it, big white space opportunity. Two, it's a great brand in terms of a taste profile and a quality profile, so I give it really high marks there. And so when you look at that and then sort of my understanding of the marketplace, and you put all those factors together, it creates a really nice picture of opportunity for the business and what we can go do. And so I love those type of opportunities where I can look at scaling up and really having a great opportunity to create a great run and being new. So yeah, you're right. We're kind of reshaping. We're enhancing the playbook as it goes along because he's obviously going to be looking to stretch more and more geographies. Obviously, being the first franchisee creates a really good template that we can now disseminate and use as a bit of a model going forward. Not that this won't be tweakable as well. There's going to be other learnings that we're going to have, but at least in terms of starting in new markets, this is the first sort of go, hit the button and go. And I'm excited about what we're going to learn, also what we're going to deliver and create traction for the future for Derek's brand and many, many other geographies around the country.
There's something you said in that you can't be what you can't see. So having a diverse executive team is critical to provide women and minority employees with role models and mentors and show that it's possible for them to become leaders within the company. I wonder, how does seeing Black leadership in your PepsiCo days or otherwise, how did that have an impact on your personal aspirations?
Oh, it had a huge impact. Again, I'm a really good historian of the Pepsi history, the African American culture, going back to the 1940s. Matter of fact, the first two black interns in corporate America were hired by Pepsi in the early 1940s. Alan McKellar Jr., who went to South Carolina State, and Jeanette Mound, who went to Hampton University, Hampton Institute at the time, but Hampton University where I went. And so they were the first two hired in corporate America by Pepsi as part of an essay contest. Subsequently, the first black sales force was hired a few years later by Pepsi because they identified the black cohort as being an important business case item for them. They wanted to make sure they can penetrate that market to drive sales and drive growth for their franchisees. And they saw that group was basically being untapped. No one else was investing in that cohort, so they decided to do that and lean in that way. And obviously, to do that, you've got to sort of be able to walk the talk, and not only on the outside, but also on the inside. And so they started that journey back in the 40s, and that obviously was carried through even up to today. And so when I was obviously being recruited, I knew that history, understood that history, certainly understood a lot better as I've been in the company and got a chance to even have a relationship with Alan McKellar. So can you imagine a younger executive like me that's rising up, has a relationship with the first black intern and sales leader or salesperson individual hired in corporate America in the 40s. Can you imagine the nuggets that he gave me for about a 10-year window up until he passed away in 2018 I was getting some real nuggets from him, and it was a pleasure. I go see him every year in St. Louis, and he would, just share a lot of wisdom and inspiration with me. And really, I understood the playbook. I understood the mission. I understood what was expected. And I understood that I had to need to have a lot of courage like he and his comrades did. They had to have a lot more courage than I did. And so if they were able to do what they did back in the 40s and 50s and 60s to get things started for many of us around corporate America, I can do my part to carry it forward and pay it forward. And so that was beautiful. So I was always inspired by the company's mission on this. And my role was to sort of keep, paying it off and make sure we're handing the torches off to the next group so that they can keep running that race of progression, excellence, and high achievement. And that's what I believe they intend to do.
We talk often on this podcast about how, diversity is not just the right thing to do, but it actually yields business success.
Correct.
Can you talk about, in your experiences, how you've seen diversity actually impact the bottom line?
Absolutely. No, there's no doubt. It's business case. I mean, the company made that decision back in the 40s. It always started with a business case. Now, the fact that, it was also morally right and really as the social norm started to change and move, it was the right thing to do as well. So now you've got this business case where it's driving revenue and profit, and you're also helping society improve in terms of its shape and scope. It's the gift that keeps from us the best of both worlds. And I think today, what's missing in some of these conversations, certainly recently, has been we've gotten off of the business case, right? Nobody, people are saying, well, we're walking away from a certain programming element or in our business. Well, absent of talking about what you're doing, it to me like creates a big void in terms of where you're walking away from an inside perspective or you walk away from the outside perspective, because the last time I checked, any business that you want growth from all cohorts, right? You want the minority cohort, you want the female cohort, you want the white diverse cohort. You want everybody's money, right? In terms of your business. I think that's the way most, certainly big businesses approach their growth strategy. And so in my mind, if you stay consistent with that and look at that as the lens at which you approach this whole thing, it's a triangle. There's a consumer need that we're going to continue to focus on because that drives and pays the bills and delivers the shareholder returns for us. Inside the company, that connects to the culture of the company because we want to basically look like the market that one we sell to, we're pursuing. On some level, we want to look like that market. So therefore, there's a recruitment effort, a development effort, and an acceleration effort that should occur organically with that as you continue to pursue these consumers outside and grow with these consumers, knowing that demographic shifts are going to keep changing and leaning in to where there's more buying power coming from those cohorts. And then there's a community element where, you're obligated to, as you make profit and you're doing the right thing with your culture, to now help continue to stand up areas where your people work, eat, play, and live. Your consumers and your associates in the company, it's your obligation to do that. So in my mind, if we stay within the triangle and still focus on that, yes, we can rename it, we can rebrand it, we can evolve it, we should evolve it from where it was, no doubt about it. But just to say I'm walking away from it and not doing anything else, what does that really mean? Are you walking away from the consumer part too? Because if you how do you do that when you? So to me, this is a big leadership moment, and I think leaders need to stand up and defend their position around the business case and how that connects inside the company and it connects outside the company.
Yeah.
And I don't like the word carve out. I don't like the word mandates. I think those things are detrimental to a culture. I think those things are absolutely things that should not be in play anymore. Things that might have been necessary in more turbulent times, extremely turbulent times where laws are being broken all the time. I think we're in a different era now. There's still a lot of challenges out there, no doubt about it. But if you stay true to that model, you're going to be doing the right thing and you're going to be making the money, the business decisions. You're going to do the right thing for your associates across all cohorts. Everybody can win. Everybody truly can win. And you're going to do the right thing from the community activation standpoint. The places that are in the most need, you're going to stand those up. And again, all cohorts should be involved in that in terms of impact. So nobody should get left behind. Nobody should be excluded. Nobody should be isolated. And I think that delivers a win with profit, a win with culture, and a win with sort of standing up the places we work, live, eat, play in, and value the most as our communities.
So I'm going to make this my last one, be respectful of your time, but I'm super interested in you going a little level deeper on that, because I remember there was about 12 conversations that I had in the middle of the George Floyd COVID, time period, where we were talking about all the commitments being made to our people. And my interviews, like, it's at least 12 interviews where I was asking, how long is this window going to be open? And out of those conversations, we were like, 3 years, maybe 4 years. And surprise, we're at 3-4 years, since that, to where we're starting to see some of this stuff be rolled back. But there's a reality on the field where if you're an entrepreneur working with some of these brands, or if you're working with some of these companies, that you have to live with. How should we be thinking about, okay, maybe the corporate, sentiment will be reset to where they actually figure out, to your point, that, okay, you got to fill that void with something, but I got to live today. Like, I got to figure out how to navigate this particular situation I'm in. How should we be thinking about that, both as entrepreneurs and as executives or career people?
Yeah, I had to deal with this real time. And I do think there was an environment, and I mentioned this on the call the other day, that there was also an atmosphere while there was a lot of pledging of commitments and spending, and they're true. Let's face it. There were committed carve-outs. Were committed, and people would actually approach me outside around almost with an entitlement mindset. And I think that was dead wrong. And I think looking back on that, and some of those conversations I would have with some of these organizations who were just basically saying, I saw your company made a statement. I'm calling you to engage in conversation around,
I need that
I
check.
want to participate. I want to participate. And I'm going to participate based off of what? Just participate off of who you are,
Right.
what you look like sort of talk to me about capability, talking about competency, talking about ROI. Like, you need to get sort of your act together. Like I want to help you, but you got to first help yourself. And so the first thing I would say to a lot of businesses, and this wasn't everybody, but there were a significant amount of businesses who just expected to get handouts because it was that time, and they read a statement on social media or somewhere in the media. And my whole perspective is, and right now, especially more importantly, is it's all to me about you demonstrating your ability to have stronger capabilities, stronger competencies, your ability to understand the organization's language of who you want to work with and working with them, and understanding how to make connections inside those spaces is going to be different between you getting the business and not getting the business. It won't be because of who you are, what you look like, and everything else. And so I think taking care of yourself and leveling up yourself is a starting point, I think, for a message to all businesses. Don't expect carve-outs. So you shouldn't have expected anyway. And if you were in that mindset of expecting things just because you were, quote unquote, there were carve-outs allocated to minority-owned businesses, and you happen to jump in line, you happen to jump in the queue and get programs, get commitments from that. Hey, more power to you. But that was going to be short-lived, and now we're here. And so how do you stand up on your own merit? It's the same thing for associates, right? So leadership has to solve for the consumer, the culture, and the community part. That challenge needs to be absolutely pushed. As an associate, how do you bet on yourself? How do you believe in yourself, and how do you be yourself? And what does that best version of yourself model look like for you as an individual inside a company? Now, your selection criteria may change. You may look at companies now differently based on them, well, we're going to opt out or we're going to opt in, or, you to me should always take a step back from that anyway and look at the companies that do the best job of the triangulation. Because there are companies out there that do a good job of triangulation and articulate that. There are companies that don't do a good job of they might be doing triangulation, but they don't articulate triangulation. And then there's companies that just aren't doing triangulation whatsoever. They're not paying attention at all. They're basically focused on the top and the bottom line, but in terms of community, in terms of culture, hands off on that. And so you as an individual need to do your homework and research on those companies that have those different sort of, tiers of their engagement in this. And then you have to decide, as you join those companies, you're going to have to find ways for you to level yourself up. You're not going to, again, look up and expect them to do that for you. Now, as you start to get traction, as you start delivering an ROI for them that shows that you are a high caliber player, you're a high caliber athlete, you're going to get the investment. You're going to get the time. You're going to get the opportunities. And so I'm trying to, in this new chapter, empower people, equip people with the knowledge and the playbooks they need to be their best version of themselves. And therefore, you have a better control of your own destiny than sort of relying on a lot of infrastructure to sort of help you get there. Because that, for at least right now, will be very rocky and very turbulent. You're not going to have it. Certainly it's not going to be very transparent of what that is if it's there. So you have to now find ways to really bounce yourself up to navigate through that until we can get back to the leadership model, can get back to some stability and a good articulation of what the new DEI journey really is. How's it branded? What does it look like? How does it affect the triangle I talked about? How do we create something that wins for everybody? How's it more comprehensive? How's it more collaborative? And how's it more compassionate? That's what I call the next set of 3 C's need to be, and leaders need to go figure that out. We don't need one leader now, like we did many, many decades ago, or that one leader's not in place anymore. Now, it to me is incumbent around community by community. This could be city by city, it could be state by state, but leaders need to come together, try to create these frameworks that they can then take into big business, they can take into education, they can take into government. They can socialize these things to now help move this along in a progressive, productive manner, not a manner where we're always going to be fighting uphill or talking about things that create a lot of tension, boycotts and things like that. Those things are, in my mind, again, short-sighted. I want to play the long game, not the short game. Because I think we're better equipped if we can set up the future. It's our job to set the future up right now. If we're not setting up the future, what are we doing? We're still trying to get it ourselves. It's not about us anymore. It's about the next generation. We got to set the next generations up for success. And that mind really will now require a new leadership challenge with some different thinking and a thing that's comprehensive, collaborative, and compassionate. And I think we can get there. I know we'll get there. It's going to take some time, but this is a lockdown leadership moment, not a retreat, not to fight each other, not to condemn each other, not to criticize each other. It's a time to really lock and load and really focus on